You're not quiet because you have nothing to say. You're quiet because you have entire universes running through your head, and you learned early that most people aren't actually listening. They're just waiting for their turn to talk. So you stopped offering pieces of yourself to conversations that were never designed to hold them. While everyone else is filling silence with noise, with commentary, with performance, you're in your head running simulations, analyzing patterns, connecting dots that nobody else seems to see. And that constant internal processing isn't emptiness, it's the opposite. It's so full that speaking feels like a reduction, like trying to translate symphony into single notes. People think you're shy or awkward or disengaged, but what you actually are is overwhelmed by how much you notice, how many layers exist in every interaction, how loud the world is when you're paying attention to all of it at once. You see the micro-expressions people don't know, they're making the contradictions between what they say and how they say it, the patterns in their behavior that reveal what they're actually feeling versus what they're pretending to feel. And carrying all of that awareness while watching everyone else operate on autopilot is exhausting in a way that nobody who doesn't experience it could understand. You're always thinking about whether you're taking up too much space, whether you're being too much or not enough. Whether the silence you're creating is uncomfortable for other people, whether you should say something just to fill the void even though you have nothing you actually want to say. You rehearse conversations before they happen, during them, and after they're over, replaying what you said, what you should have said, what they might have meant by what they said, analyzing tone and subtext and implications, until a simple exchange becomes a multi-layered dissertation that nobody else is thinking about because they moved on the second the conversation ended. You're tired of being told to speak up, to share more, to be more present, as if your silence is a problem that needs solving rather than a valid way of existing in a world that mistakes volume for value. People ask what you're thinking and you freeze because how do you explain that you're thinking about 17 things simultaneously? That you're processing the conversation, observing the room, analyzing your own anxiety about being perceived, wondering if the question itself is genuine curiosity or social obligation, and none of those thoughts translate into the simple answer they're expecting. The silence you occupy isn't empty, it's protective. It's the only space where you don't have to perform, where you don't have to translate yourself into something digestible, where you can just be the full, complicated, overwhelming version of yourself without immediately having to justify or explain or minimize it. You're always thinking about exit strategies even in situations that are supposed to be fun or relaxing. You're calculating how long you need to stay to be polite. How to leave without offending anyone. How to recharge after giving so much energy to existing in spaces that require you to be smaller than you actually are. The internal monologue never stops. It's commentary on top of observation, on top of analysis, on top of feeling. And sometimes you wish you could just experience things, simply just be in the moment without immediately dissecting it. But your brain doesn't work that way. It's always connecting, always questioning, always searching for meaning in things that other people seem to accept at surface level. You're thinking about how weird it is that everyone pretends to be okay when nobody's actually okay, how exhausting it is to maintain the social fiction that everything is fine, how isolating it feels to see through the performance while being expected to perform alongside it. You notice when people are lying, when they're uncomfortable, when they're pretending to care, when they're going through the motions, and you can't unsee it. You can't turn off the part of your brain that reads subtext, so you're constantly navigating a world where everyone is saying one thing and meaning another, and you're the only one who seems bothered by the gap. You're always thinking about whether you matter, whether people would notice if you disappeared, whether your presence adds value, or if you're just taking up space that someone more interesting, more outgoing, more normal could occupy better. The deepest fear running under all of it is that you're fundamentally uninteresting, that the reason you're quiet isn't because you're deep, but because you're empty, that if people actually knew what you were thinking, they'd be disappointed by how mundane it is, how anxious it is, how much of it is just worry and overthinking disguised as insight. You're thinking about all the things you should have said but didn't, all the moments you let pass, because you were too busy analyzing whether speaking up was worth the energy. Whether anyone actually wanted to hear what you had to say, whether your contribution would land the way you intended, or just make things more awkward. The weight of unexpressed thoughts is crushing. You're carrying years of things you meant to say, observations you never shared, feelings you never voiced, and all of it is stacked up inside, creating this pressure that makes every interaction feel heavier than it needs to be. You've built entire relationships in your head with people who barely know you, exist, analyzed their behavior, understood their patterns. Connected with them on a level they'll never know about, because actually expressing that depth would require vulnerability you're not sure they can handle. You're always thinking about how different you are from everyone around you, how much easier it seems to be for them, how naturally they navigate social situations that feel like warfare to you. And you can't tell if you're more evolved or just more broken. The truth running under all of this internal noise is that you're not quiet because you're lacking. You're quiet because you're processing a level of information and emotion and awareness that most people don't have access to, and that processing requires all the bandwidth that other people use for small talk and performance. You learned early that speaking has consequences, that showing yourself fully is dangerous, that people use your words against you, that vulnerability is ammunition in the hands of people who don't understand its value. So you went quiet, not because you had nothing to say, but because you had too much to say, and nowhere safe to say it, and silence became the only option that didn't require you to shrink yourself to fit into conversations that couldn't hold you. The constant internal dialogue isn't a bug, it's a feature. It's how you make sense of a world that doesn't make sense, how you find patterns in chaos, how you protect yourself from being blindsided by people and situations that others walk into without a second thought. You're thinking about whether it's worth it to stay quiet. Whether the safety of silence is worth the loneliness of never being fully known. Whether protecting yourself from judgment means accepting that you'll never be truly seen. The people who tell you to be more outgoing, more social, more willing to share, don't understand that you're not withholding yourself to be difficult. You're protecting something precious that the world has repeatedly shown it doesn't know how to handle carefully. You're thinking that maybe the silence isn't the problem, maybe the problem is a world that pathologizes depth, that mistakes stillness for emptiness, that demands constant expression as proof of existence. You're thinking that maybe you're not broken for being this way. Maybe the world is broken for making you feel like something is wrong with being introspective, analytical, careful with your words and your presence. You're thinking that there have to be others like you, people who live in their heads, who see more than they say, who carry entire worlds inside them while appearing blank on the outside, and finding them, connecting with them, being seen by them might be worth the risk of breaking silence. You're thinking that maybe one day you'll find a space where you don't have to perform, where silence is understood as fullness, not emptiness, where depth is valued, not pathologized, where you can exist as exactly who you are without translation or apology or explanation.